This is the Transparency Podcast Show.
Welcome back to Transparency Podcast Show. Michelle.
Hi.
Um,
How are you?
Good. How are you? How about yourself?
Good. Happy
How's
Earth Day.
life? So, who's our guest today?
Today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited to introduce people to. Her name is Catherine Swain, and we've talked once, and I've been so impressed by her story, by her vision for what she wants to do, specifically giving back into our own community and beyond. And so I'm very excited to have everybody meet Catherine today.
Okay, I can't wait to hear about her stories.
Hello.
Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the Transparency Podcast Show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really, I'm so thrilled that you guys are doing this. This is something that is sorely needed, and I just feel like you guys are on the leading edge. I'm excited.
Well, talking about
thank
sorely
you.
needed, you are sorely needed. Sorely needed, sorely needed.
Sorry, needed.
What you are doing and your vision of giving your years of expertise back into our own community, I'm so excited about. And the little stories that we've already talked about online, I think will inspire our community and be sirens going on.
It's okay.
Yep.
That's what happened to.
Welcome to live podcast.
live broadcast.
Yes.
Was that your siren?
I have no idea
It's in
what
the,
side.
it's in the,
It's in a virtual.
it's in the
world.
headphones somewhere. So someone's in trouble somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, so let's
Well,
get
very
back
good.
to.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and your years of experience, and then as a trans woman in your transition, the difficulties that tends to bring up, and what that launched you into now.
Wow, that is quite it's quite an opener.
Right to it.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I probably should be upfront. I transitioned, started 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. I worked in the financial services industry for 27 years. I was essentially, an investment advisor for registered investment advisors. I was a representative for those firms. I was a professional trader. I handled, we can get into the details of my experience there. But, I have been in the business so long, and the reason why I waited to transition so long was that there was just no place for me.
Okay.
So when I was 25 and 30 and 35, every time I thought, well, now I'll start thinking about transitioning, the eventuality and what I eventually got to was, well, where am I going to have a job?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'll be honest, today I'm 50, or I was 50 I'm 50 this year. And, to think that 25 years ago in the financial services industry, the idea that I would, as a transgender woman, come out, by the way, that was my siren, that
For
I'll
sure.
come
It's
out
okay.
and be able to continue the same career I've had all along was just not realistic. I would go to conferences where there'd be 1,000 or 2,000 investment professionals, and it was almost entirely men. It was almost entirely conservative, white Republican
Right.
men.
Exactly.
And the idea that a transgender woman would be an executive in that environment was just not really realistic. So, you know, I put it off, and I kept putting it off. And the thing about being trans is that it never gets better.
Yes.
It never goes away.
Right.
You're just, as you get older, the harder it gets
Absolutely.
mentally to cope with
Right.
it. And so I made a decision a few years ago, about actually 7 years to be exact, that I was going to prepare myself to do this late in life, and started to write down all the things I felt that I needed to do, not just for my own transition, but for my career and for my community. And so that's what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing now is basically a culmination of what I thought about 7 years ago.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love how our journeys, even in the difficulty and the complexity and the misunderstanding and so many issues, how that still builds us who we are and prepares us for the future. I didn't start transition until 52. Kind of the same reasons, largely a little bit of a different field within a majority white Christian conservative ministry. Also kind of the same thing. I wasn't going to be able to keep my job in that. And so I put it off for all those years. But in that process, it builds us.
Yes.
And it helps us prioritize the things that are important. If I transitioned at 25, I would have been totally different than how now
Right.
the first 2 years of my transition. And
Yeah.
so your story, it's a difficult one, but it's easy to see how those battle tested difficulties have built you into the woman you are today. And so I'm excited about that. So tell us a
Yes.
little bit about your journey and your vision.
Yeah, so just to kind of go from the beginning, I I grew up in Northern California. I recently relocated to LA to start my company, but I grew up in a little tiny town, Mendocino.
Okay.
We had about 1,100 kids or 1,100 people in the whole town, so there was about 150 kids in the high school, and that was the environment I found myself growing up. It was very um, not to say isolated, but it was certainly, if you ever grown up in in a small town, everybody knows every single thing about you. So I became a very private person as a child,
Wow.
especially knowing, and I first identified or kind of figured out that I was a little bit unique in that I was uncomfortable with my gender starting around age 5. So in a town where there's just so few people, you really need to be protective of those types of
Right.
truths. And not until I got into the real world and I moved to San Francisco and then to Washington D.C., where I went to school to work in basically I was educated in government finance. My first
Mm.
job out of college with Merrill Lynch was doing municipal bond deals for the state that I was living in. And so my education from a investment business perspective started when I was right out of college. At 21, I joined Merrill, and at 23, I was basically the representative doing the state municipal offering deals. And at that point, you're in it, and and you are doing everything you can to
Yes.
survive. Um, and so I chose to basically just you know hide who I
Hmm.
was, and I lived in San Francisco also at the time, and there was a big trans community, and I was so and I'll be honest, I was so ashamed of who I was at that time. So this is
Yes.
1996. That like there was I lived ironically I lived in a neighborhood in San Francisco called Nob Hill, and just down the street, like 3 blocks away, was one of the most famous transgender bars really in the world at that time, and it was the Mother Lode.
Mm.
And you would drive by, walk by, and there would be trans women just all around the place, hanging out, like falling, like literally flowing out the front door, and it was a happening place. And I remember walking around the block to
Yeah.
avoid it
Wow.
because I was
Hmm.
that you know
Mhm.
ashamed of who
Yeah.
I was. And it took me a long, long time to get to a place where I was comfortable accepting myself. And then once I got to that place, the world really just opened up for me, and I've never looked back, and I'm living a life that I always dreamed of.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing.
Cool. I want to find out, like, did you have any financial background in school, or did how did you choose this field? Like, will you be
Right.
always interested, or yeah, or are you an
Yeah,
investor
no.
yourself?
Um, yeah, no. So here's another truth about me.
Okay.
I'm half Hispanic, and I grew up in my household. My parents split up when I was very young, and my mom and my grandmother raised me, and they spoke Spanish only. My mom was a single mom. Her mom was a single mom. Their my grandmother's dad was a single dad. So we've never been wealthy to the point where
Mm-hmm.
we could just say, oh, I remember talking to kids in high school. They're like, oh, I've got my trust account. I'm thinking about what to buy with stocks. And I thought, who has a trust account?
Right.
And that was my first introduction, which is going to a more affluent school and
Right.
finding out about this stuff.
Mm.
But growing up in not to say poor, I would never say poor, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely we didn't have money in the same way that other kids did. And
Right.
so for me to when I started to think about a career, it was more of a necessity, finding out about things that we didn't it wasn't natural to us. It
Yes.
wasn't natural to think
Right.
about a retirement account or
Right.
401k or investing or options or futures.
Yes.
Nothing of that existed in our world. And
Yeah.
so
The school
I
doesn't teach that as well. So
right, and
yeah.
I knew that to break that cycle of being a single parent who was struggling to get by, that I had to make a conscious decision to focus on that as a priority in my life. So I literally just started in high school studying the stock market, and by the time I graduated
Wow.
from college, I got a job at 21 working in an office as a sales assistant.
Okay.
And what was funny was that the first office I worked in, there was 40, at that time, there were brokers.
Yeah.
We now are financial advisors, financial planners, et
Right.
cetera,
Right.
but they were brokers. And out of the 40 brokers, only two were women.
Wow.
And and out of the sales assistants, the people who supported those 40 brokers, I think there was one like 16 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They were 16 women and 14 women and two gay men.
Okay.
And that was my first education to the business, which is if you want to be successful, white males tend to dominate. And if you are
Correct.
going to survive in this business, and you're a woman, you're going to be in support. And
Right.
that was the first realization that hit me that this is real, and you have to survive. You have to kind of do anything you can to make it to
Right.
that next level.
So,
Yes.
do you have any advice for people who, like I say, never invest because, like, the school system never teach us about financial literacy?
Right?
So a lot of time, like people, I don't have money to invest. I can't even pay my bills and stuff. So, do you have any advice to people like that? Because today, especially today's world, we're facing inflations, we're facing,
Right?
um, and there's a lot of economy uncertainties. We might
Yes.
have recession
Right.
coming up. So all this is tied up to how much you can invest, not how much you can save. Correct. So, do you have any advice to people like that who might thinking want to do it but not sure where to start?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and almost it's funny, there's like certain things that certain communities know, and then certain things that other communities don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
And one of them was just the power of compounding. The
Right.
power
Right.
of compounding for me was a revelation, and it sounds so simple. And I'm sure you've probably seen some example of the power of compounding in school. But as far as a portfolio goes, the difference between someone who saves $100 a month and just puts it in the market. You do
Right.
not have to be an expert. You do not have to pick Amazon
Yes.
versus Apple versus AT&T or Boeing or Chevron or anything like that.
Right.
All you have to do is put $100 a month into the market. Now, $100 for a lot of people is a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of people also $100 is something that they can't afford. That's
Mm-hmm.
100
True.
bucks a month is $3 a day.
Right.
You know,
Mm.
and
Just
Right.
so if you can take $3 a day and you put that money, that $100 to work each month, and you
yes.
just blindly put it in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 25, if you go 40 years out in the future, at 65, you'll have $1 million.
Yes.
Now, the trick is if you just wait 10 years, which is, hey, I'm 25, I really need that 100 bucks. I like to go out to name whatever bar, whatever, you like to, I love
Mhm.
shopping. So that $100 doesn't seem like a lot today, but the
Mm-hmm.
difference between starting at age 25 versus 35, at 35, that instead of having $1 million, do you know what you have? It's closer to $300,000.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's significant.
And so that 10-year difference
Right.
in your early age is what makes all the difference.
Correct.
And so getting people accustomed to the idea of saving for their future,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm trans, right?
Yeah.
We all know the burdens that we all face as trans people, and so much of my money and focus and everything went into basically making my transition as good as it possibly
Yes.
could.
Yes.
The idea of investing, literally, when I went through transition, was like the
Mm-hmm.
last thing I was thinking about.
Correct.
But the
Exactly.
moment you're feeling like you are who you are,
Mm-hmm.
well, the real world comes, like the tide comes rushing
Right.
back in, and you got to figure it out quickly.
Yes.
And so the best thing you can do is to start saving up a saving program the earlier you can do it,
Wow.
the earliest you can do
Yes.
it. And that's the difference.
That's
And
really good. That's
and
really good. If I had done that, I would have been in a different
yeah,
position right now.
I
Makes
actually
sense.
just started 2 years ago, and I read a lot of books. Is pay yourself first. So I kind of follow what you just said. Put maybe 10% or 30%
Yeah.
from what I my income, and then put it in the
Right.
IRA, Roth IRA, traditional IRA,
hmm
and then yeah. So I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what happened after 10 years, like you
Yes.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our community faces so much unemployment, underemployment. Um, back into your industry of financial services, how difficult it would be for a woman in general, much less a trans person. And so our
Hmm.
community is even more plagued by some of these difficulties. And so, what is the vision with LGBTQ Invest in that, in the difficulties and the setbacks that we have faced in our community? How can your company make a difference?
So one of the things one of the things that I've had lately, now that LGBTQI is in business, is that when I talk to prospective customers, these are folks that are gay, lesbian, trans, bi, whatever they
Right.
are, and,
Hmm.
and allies, especially allies. They say to me, "Hey, Catherine, I love what you're doing, but I already have a guy over at Merrill
Mm,
Lynch, or I have a gal over at UBS, or I have someone at JP Morgan that I really love." And my message to them is, and by the way, that relationship is really valuable. But the thing you have to know is that while you might have a representative that really speaks to you, the people who actually manage that money, the people who are taking your investment dollars and putting it to work in the market, they're mostly, again, to kind of echo this, they're usually the management and ownership is a single class of people. It
right.
is white, Republican, conservative men.
Right.
And and yes, LGBTQ people do exist in the investment management space, but as I can attest, I've had in my career nothing but those guys as my bosses, and I've had nothing but gay and women as my assistants in my career.
Uh,
And so, what LGBTQI is really meant to do is meant to create a safe, positive, and inclusive space so that those of us in the community not just are heard and and listened
yes.
to, for our investing needs and our futures, but more importantly, the money that we are handing to that advisor, they are not just handing it over to the same person
Right.
who might be investing in Chick-fil-A
Right.
or
Hmm.
might be
Exactly.
investing in, we just had this weekend Coachella.
Right.
The Coachella Festival. I mean, think about the millions and millions, the tens of millions of dollars that goes into Coachella. And the owner is the gentleman named Anschutz. He's a huge advocate for
Right.
anti-LGBTQ laws that are being passed in Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill and the anti-trans
Wow.
bills. And
Yes.
to think that you in the community who are fighting for your rights
Yes.
are then handing your money to someone who then hands it to someone who supports people like Trump?
Exactly. Yes.
No, no, you have to put a line in the sand. And when you think about what other firms are available to me, LGBTQI is one of the only firms that exists that is 100% owned, trans owned or LGBTQ owned, and
Hmm.
focused on the community. And we are investing in a socially responsible way so that we apply screens
Yes.
to the world of investments to only invest in companies that are LGBTQ positive and
Right.
inclusive and actively going out to try and help the community. And it's pretty easy for us to identify which company those are. And then from there, we then do our normal investment analysis
Amazing.
and
Amazing.
allocations.
I think about those families in Texas, for example, that are facing the issue of, do I stay here? Where do I go? Who's answering, who's helping me in this? And so I think your vision is that breath of fresh air. Your vision is that cup of cold water that our community needs.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons we're so excited about having you here
Yes.
and amping this up as much as possible, because those people are making the decisions. The Phil Anschutz that owns soccer teams and the I guess the Dignity Health Sports Center and Staples, those are the people that are making the decisions, and we have
Right. Right.
no recourse for that. But actually, now we do in your vision.
Yeah, and so really, it's funny because I started to go there earlier. When I was 25, if someone said that there was an LGBTQ firm where I could go and work with other LGBTQ investors as a trans woman, I would have been there instantly.
Wow.
And at 30 and 35 and 40, and the
Right.
fact that that never happened, there was never a place for
Mhm.
me to continue my career. That is largely what LGBTQ is about. It's about jobs for the community.
Right.
Yes.
And more importantly, taking folks who were like me when I was 25 and building their career so that they have a destination.
Yes.
So if you're 25 and you just got out of business school, or you went to Wharton as an undergrad, and you say, I'm gay, I'm trans, I'm whatever you are,
Right.
and you say, I want a place where I'm respected and I can be successful as an executive and eventually one day run my own firm, that place does not exist for you today until now,
Yes.
LGBTQI.
Until now.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Can I actually say one thing? Because I, my whole family is from Texas. We've actually been, being Hispanic, we've been in the Rio Grande Valley for
Okay.
over 300 years. So my family it was part of Texas before it was Texas.
Right.
And when I came out, I was really surprised to find out that I had family members who were trans and living in Texas.
Wow.
And when I reached out to them, it was funny because I reached out to an uncle who said, well, let me get you in touch with, your family member. And then I had to go through this series of hoops to get the private Discord message for one of my cousins. And I thought,
Wow.
this person isn't just like available on Gmail or, that. And the answer is no. They were terrified
Oh my
about
gosh.
keeping who they were and their truth private. And
Mhm.
and that's the difference between the world that I live in California and the ones in, let's say, like a place like Texas. And so I often use the story, which is, if you're LGBTQ and you're in Iowa and you have banking needs and investing needs, or maybe not Iowa, maybe Florida, maybe Texas, maybe Arkansas,
Any-
wherever it is, you really don't have a lot of great options to walk into a bank and be treated with respect and dignity like you would with a place like my firm.
Yes.
Okay.
So incredibly needed.
Yeah. So, what do you see like within, I mean, like after 5 years, what do you see that your company can be like? Like, do you want to do more besides LGBTQ invest, or like, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, there is one other firm that does banking right now, and I think they're doing a great job.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not alone, and that's the great news.
Okay.
That there are a couple firms, believe it or not, there are a couple other firms that are trans owned that are registered investment advisors. They're also relatively new. They have a very niche. They're very
Mm-hmm.
focused on a certain segment of the population. What we're trying to do. There's a when we divide up the universe of investors. Within the industry, we look at people who are $0 to $100,000, 100 to a million, and then a million to 5 million, and then five
Okay.
and up. And so each one of those categories is a distinct market. And so my space has always been in the mass affluent market, and this is investors in the $100,000 to $1 million space. So this is not CEOs and executives, even though we've had those clients in the past. This is really mom and pops, folks who
Mm-hmm.
are working. Maybe they're a plumber, maybe they work for an airline, maybe they just have a regular job where they had a 401k.
Right.
And that 401k that they started savings turned into $300,000. So that's the type of client that we really want to get to,
Okay.
because that's the person who's not going to be as represented
Yes.
by their investment management company
Right.
or their bank
Exactly.
as they would
Mm-hmm.
with us. Now, if someone has $20 million, people will do and say a lot of things to make sure they get that business.
Yeah.
But if you have
True.
200,000, that's a different story. And
Yes.
that's the space we reside in. So when I look at in the past, I've managed as much as 350 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to, and there's a whole another story about that. Um, and I had to basically let that book of business go to be able to do what I'm doing now.
Wow.
Right.
Um, and when you think about the size, one of the stats that really struck me recently was that there's, and I forget, I want to say it was, I think I read this in Out Magazine, but that in 2020, 5.4% of Americans identified as LGBTQ. These are people who are out saying, I'm
Yeah.
LGBTQ and I'm going to announce that on a census or in some
Mm-hmm.
other
Right.
place. From 2020 to 2021, that number went from 5.4 to 7.1
Wow.
in the course
Mm-hmm.
of 1 year,
Wow.
which was shocking because if you look back over decades, that number has been 3, 4, 5% for decades. And all of a
Right.
sudden,
Yes.
in 1 year, it went from 5.4 to 7.1. And the answer is what happened?
Hmm.
And what happened was the next generation, Generation Z, the baby boomers are about 1 or 2% LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
Generation X is 3 or 4. The millennials, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. I forget what the exact number is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Gen Z comes along and they're almost 22% LGBTQ.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so if you're a Republican and you are looking to the future of demographics, and you're seeing that 22% of the next generation in America is self identifying already as LGBTQ, you must be terrified.
Yes.
And so I really look at this recent run of anti LGBTQ bills and
Exactly.
anti trans, youth bills. And to me, this is them being this is their last hurrah. This is them
Absolutely.
saying, we're going to stigmatize this group because if we don't, the demographics are going to mean the end of
Right.
republicanism and
Exactly.
at least conservative republicanism in
Yes.
America. And
Yes.
so let's take these bathroom bills and these anti-LGBTQ bills as essentially the early phases of a major transition in our political system. And I go to
Yes.
bed feeling really good about those
Yes.
numbers.
Right. And then people throw up the argument of it's a trend or something. And no, we just have space that we feel safe enough to come out now.
Yeah.
And so
Right,
that's what I'm
right.
so when I see these trans kids and these families that are going through this pain, I'm blown away by the strength of these trans kids. And it almost makes me it makes me tear up because of the opportunity they have to walk authentically at such a young age is amazing. And
Right,
who they can grow into be because of that is beautiful. And there's a lot
right.
of people that will do anything in their
Mm-hmm.
power to stop that.
Absolutely. I love it.
You also mentioned when we first talked, kind of you have a sister company, Catherine Swain Associates. Tell us a little bit about that because I found that fascinating and some of the opportunities that presents to people that may live in a place that is not so LGBTQ friendly. Maybe they're brokers or maybe there's someone that um, is in the industry at some level, but don't have a place that can feel safe, like you talked about earlier.
Right. And so this is where, so for example, I think about one of my girlfriends who I mean, she says that I was her mentor in the business, and I appreciate that, but she's done just fine on her own. Um, I think of her. She's an advisor. At 41, she got divorced. She was a stay-at-home mom. She took a job on Craigslist that just happened to be a receptionist for an investment management company. And at 48, she now manages $90 million and is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And that all happened within the last 7 years. And so I think about a woman like her, where she's still not represented by even, she's still not represented by her management. And so the conundrum that I faced is that if I bring her into LGBTQ investments or LGBTQ invest as an advisor, while she's a great ally for the community, I also know that 99% of our clients are not LGBTQ. And so if we want an advisor who's either an ally or who's self-identifying as LGBTQ, and you want them to be able to offer a service that isn't necessarily draped in the LGBTQ flag, that's what Catherine Swain and Company is all
Wow.
about. And Catherine Swain and Company also is where we um, can it becomes kind of a hub for people who want to invest in the same way, but this is the LGBTQ brand is just not for them. And that's fine. And so
Sure.
we have both brands to
Yes.
work with investors. And and to be honest, out of that 350 million that I used to manage, I needed a destination for those folks. And that's what
Right.
Catherine Swain
Sure.
and Company is.
Definitely. I love that. I
Yeah.
love how you are not only focusing on space for our people, but
Right.
for allies and for people that live in places that aren't Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York City. And so that vision of uniting purpose, vision, but then purpose in our community, I love. It's inspiring. And that's what motivates me as the founder of TransZone to highlight and shed light on these things, because business is so much more about just providing jobs and paying your bills. It's about change, and it's
Yeah.
about looking at what needs to happen and pursuing that change. And so I'm so inspired by what you're doing, and
Same here.
kind of both phases of the vision, because talking about world changers, it just makes me so happy to hear about it and talk to you about it.
So can I add one thing?
Sure.
I don't think any of this would have been possible, believe it or not, without COVID, at
Yeah.
least the way we're doing it today. Um, so, so COVID, I'm actually relatively unique in that I started hormones on March 1st of 2020.
Wow.
So if you remember, like by the end of March, we were in
Yes.
Yep.
lockdown. So my transition is almost exactly coinciding with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
which also meant that as I struggled with my early transition, I got to wear a mask and so
Exactly.
it was
It's
easier.
very beneficial.
Yeah.
But what that also meant is that individuals became much more comfortable doing business over the phone and Zoom and email than ever before.
Right.
And we knew that's where the industry was going. But what that did is it just sped it up by probably about 5 or 10 years,
Right.
Right.
in terms of every single person who's doing business this way.
Yes.
And so the investment management business used to be a sit down with somebody, look them in the eye face to face, and you really get to know that person on a one-on-one basis.
Mhm.
And it became a very regional business, meaning that you only invested with somebody that you were able to see face to face. Because again, this is your life savings. You want to feel comfortable with the person you're working with. Um, when COVID happened, it allowed me to take this concept, because if it was just Catherine Swain sitting in her office in LA working with clients that were within 50 miles of me, while there are plenty of folks in my market to be able to support a business, what I really honestly believe for this business is that this is going to be the brand, in my fingers crossed,
Right.
for the LGBTQ community nationwide, so that we can actually scale up this business and hire advisors all over America, but they don't necessarily have to be in your hometown.
Mhm.
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
so COVID really changed the game for us, because it basically gave us a leg up in terms of working with our community wherever they may be.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Some benefits with COVID, and for me as well
Yeah, same
at that time.
here.
But
Yeah,
yes.
because real estate, we do a lot of open houses prior to COVID, and then we have to switch all
Yeah.
to
Right.
virtual, and then that's
Right.
including virtual showings and everything,
Right.
and people are comfortable buying it just without really physically see it. So
Yeah.
that's
Right.
a new
Exactly.
new technology too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So Catherine, so where can people find you and link to your
Yes.
business?
Well, so of course, our website is LGBTQ Invest.
Okay.
I was, to be honest, when I first started this enterprise, I was shocked that that website still existed and was available.
All right.
So we got it. LGBTQ Invest, and then CatherineSwain.com is where is what I call my hub page, and
Mm-hmm.
that basically is all of my businesses. So that's LGBTQ Invest,
Mm-hmm.
that's Catherine Company, but it's also my radio show. I have a weekly
Yes.
radio show on Power 98.5 satellite radio, and the name of the show, appropriately enough, is called Catherine and Company.
Okay.
You can find us on Spotify and iHeartRadio, and a number of different other places to download that. So
Yes.
so we have the live show on 98.5 satellite radio, and then we
Mhm.
have replays that are available on Spotify and other
How
places.
about social media platforms? Can people follow
Right, and
you
then I'm
somewhere?
Catherine Swain on Instagram. That's where I have a lot of fun. So
Okay.
please follow me there.
Okay.
Yes.
All the links will be provided under the show notes so
Right.
people can check you out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we just want to encourage our listeners. First of all, thank you for listening, and please
Yes.
subscribe. But businesses like this, businesses like what Catherine is doing, is imperative for us.
Yes.
It's important to get this information out. It's important to disseminate it to people everywhere, as we were talking about, anywhere in the country, really. But there are so many lives that can be such directly impacted by this
Mhm.
information and by this resource that Catherine has done. And so I just encourage to tell your friends, go to the
Yes.
links, mention them. Let's get the word out that we can help our own people. And
Yes.
because if we don't do it, who will?
Yep.
Obviously, it's
Oh,
not too many people lining up for that. So
well, can I say what? Michelle, I'm gonna give you a plug because honestly, when I think about um, so the beginning of LGBTQI in terms of the formation of the idea came from years ago when I started my transition. The first thing I did was go out and find a transgender doctor, and my
Mhm.
doctor is trans.
Wow.
Because if I was going to sit down with somebody and give them my whole life story and let them
Right.
examine my body, I want just for my own
Yeah.
trust and my own sense of safety, I felt it was important to hire another trans person for that job. And then that blended into, and I can probably try a little harder in my voice, but I have a voice coach and she's trans. And then I have a real estate agent and he's gay. And then I have countless other people who are allies. And, my publicist is gay, my marketer is gay. My entire
Mhm.
team of support staff for LGBTQ Invest is part of the community. Now, some of those hires just came out of because of what I'm already doing, but I actively sought other folks in the
Yes.
community because that's what I wanted to do to support
Yeah.
others,
Right.
but also to make myself feel better about where I spent my money.
Right.
So
Giving back.
supporting your community, and that's where
Yes.
trans owned directory really makes a lot of sense because that's a single place you can go.
Mhm.
Any need you have, you plug in what your category is, and you're going to find people who are
Right.
doing it who are a lot like you.
Right.
Yes.
So thank you, honey, for
Thank
making
No,
you.
that
you're.
available
Thank
to all of
you.
us.
I mean, yes, it's all about us. It's about us. It's about the community because, and the story is pretty silly. It's just, I was looking for a T-shirt and trying to find
Yes.
something that was
Right.
actually trans created.
Mhm.
And there's allies out there and they're doing great, and we love
Right.
our allies and we
Mhm.
support them as well. But there's not a lot of trans creators that get a lot of recognition or
Mhm.
publicity from anywhere really. So looking for that. So I would look for a resource, and there was nothing. There was some in our local LGBTQ directory, which was mostly outside of the area, which was
Mhm.
interesting. But we needed a place that we can all come together, and so I'm excited for businesses like LGBTQ Invest to have this as a resource,
Right.
primarily to be a place where people can come to one place and see everything that's happening, to see all the great work that is being done in our community. And we have everything already. We don't have very many members yet since we're just starting, but we have landscapers and art store framing
Yeah.
CEOs, now LGBTQ Invest professionals. And so our community is amazing, and it's broad and it's vibrant, and it's so exciting to be able to highlight things like this.
Yeah, and honestly, today I always go to your website first before I hire any new contractors because I know
Oh, good.
that that's a way for me to basically make sure my money stays in the community.
Yes, exactly. So important.
Okay.
Well, wonderful. Well, we just encourage everybody to know about these resources, to get the word
Mhm.
out. Catherine, I know, is available. She's made herself available to me to ask questions, to answer questions, to have someone to bounce off different ideas that you may have in terms of investing. So please use her, use this as a resource, and let's build our community together.
Go way back around 2013, 12.
Wow.
It was a time when I started doing some movies, actings, and LGBT love stories. That's how I kind of cross path with her because at that time she has her YouTube channel, and somehow we just connect through Facebook at that time. And then we never really met in person until one of our friends who unfortunately got murdered. And we went through that whole, it hit home. So we kind of went to the court hearing and so all her name is Cecilia Daniels. So Celia, you can tell us about yourself, introduce yourself, like your background, how did you begin your gender identity journey?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shelby. I identify as a gender non-binary person of color.
Okay.
I'm an immigrant. I'm an Asian. I have 25 years of experience working in the corporate industry. And one of the advocacies that I focus on is bringing change in the diversity spectrum from the bathroom to boardroom.
Mhm.
And that's my passion. That's what I love doing, educating companies and bringing my corporate experience and helping companies to hire more trans and gender non-binary and intersex community into the workplace. So that's what I do.
That's
I love
great.
that. Bathroom to the boardroom.
Yeah, that's an awesome
Yeah.
slang. So I know you involved with trans can work.
Right.
I want to tell you a funny story that nobody knows. It's kind of embarrassing personally because when they first started it about 2016, remember? I was cast to do like their information
Oh my goodness.
commercial,
Back
but
in the day.
but somehow because you two probably know my story. I had a breakup, and then that was at that time, and then I forced myself to show up, and then I did it very horrible. I cannot read my lines. And then they asked me, smile, smile, smile. I just can't smile. Anyways, that's just my little connection with trans can work. But throughout these years, I can see they do a lot of different job affairs, right? And then
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Job fairs, trying to hire trans folks.
right, and those
educating
are
companies.
I've been one time, and they are not mom and pop businesses like a major big names and banks and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So can you tell us like what's your role in this trans can work?
Yeah. So I'm in the executive board for Transcan Work, and I've been involved with the organization when Michaela Mendelson started this organization. She was the CEO of El Pollo Loco.
Yeah. Franchise.
So she offered jobs for almost 50 Latino marginalized community in El Pollo Loco that made a big splash across the country. And even Katie Couric had featured her on some of the magazines that came out in, I think even in not in National Geography, I think in National Geography, it was featured as Gender Revolution. So there were a lot of things she made, and it created an interest in me to think about it because I wasn't out at the time. I was still trying to be out.
Right.
I was out in the community,
Yeah.
but I wasn't out in the workplace because I was afraid of losing my job. And that's when I started volunteering for Transcan Work, being out there, trying to help them get some opportunities in companies. And I've been in panels with Transcan Work. And in fact, I went as Celia and presented along with Transcan Work with Michaela in a company where I was consulting as Daniel. It was funny.
Oh wow.
So they didn't know who this person was, and I was talking about the products and everything that I knew, and they were all curious, who is this person? How does she know our products? She knows by name. And
wow.
I didn't come out at the time because I was still a little worried. But it's funny how I have been, my journey has been all these organizations, even LGBTQ, LA organization, all of these organizations have been a great stepping stone for us. And friends like yourself, it really helped a lot in those times when we were all in the same boat. We were like trying to figure out what's going on with our lives,
Right.
and we didn't know where our future is going to take us to. And look at where we are years after.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, so you mentioned about you then came out before your last job, and then you came out. Did you lose your job after you came out and you started your own business? Is that what happened?
No, I was working with companies which are doing clinical trials
Uh-huh.
for biopharmaceuticals. My experience comes in the healthcare and life sciences industry.
Right.
So I was working in the industry for a while, and my gender dysphoria was very high at the time. I couldn't be presenting myself as Daniel. I'll be wearing suit, presenting. I'll go back to my room or my hotel or my house, and then put on a maxi dress and feel like my head is above the water.
Yeah.
Breathing up, taking deep breath, like, oh my God, I'm so comfortable now.
Uh-huh.
And it was really hard. And I was doing that for a very long time. And that's when I quit my one of the last consulting companies. It was a top 5 consulting firm in America. I quit that company. I was 3 levels below the CEO, reporting to my executive director, who was at the senior vice president at the time. And I could not continue anymore, and I felt like I had to leave, and I quit that company, and I started pulling my resume together as Celia, put she and they pronouns, and started applying in all the companies, almost like 30-40 companies across LA. Every company that had a pink flag, rainbow flag, that would hire me. I put my cover letter. I was excited. I started writing all these amazing resume, and I started applying for jobs. And I went for trans can work job fairs.
Mhm.
And what was surprising to me is companies are willing to hire trans people at a lower level,
Mm.
but they were not willing to hire
Mm.
trans folks at a senior level. I was a
Yeah.
senior executive in a company, and
Right.
I'm a brown person, and women are struggling here. How would they hire a trans person like me? And so I faced discrimination. I was without a job for 1 year. I was struggling for a job. And that's
Wow.
when it occurred to me that, wow, this is really happening.
Right.
Why? And I didn't compromise on it. I had almost like 800 people reporting to me across the globe.
Uh-huh.
My P&L was 250 million, and I had so much of equity built in my resume, value that I had as a brown successful businessman, Daniel. But
Mhm.
when I came out as Celia, the kind of jobs I was given was project coordinator, administrator, um, and maybe less than $80,000. I was
Wow.
earning around $250 to $300,000, and here my salary just went back into like $80,000 with 25 years of experience in the industry,
Wow.
Yeah.
just because I came out.
Right. We did an
Wow.
episode on that about the ratio and status, right, Michelle?
Yeah,
Yes. The pay gap, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So
What
that's
were,
why we kind of do this show, Michelle, because we encourage. We know that this problem is there, but we want to
yeah,
solve it. We want to be moving on. So
right.
that's why we do this show to encourage
absolutely.
people to own their own business, be entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Right.
So,
That
so
motivated
what were
me
some
to
of the,
go for it. Sorry.
I'm sorry, what were some of the things that those corporations told you in that time that they didn't recognize your experience because you now are presenting as a woman?
I'll give you one experience. In a trans job fair, there was a senior, I won't mention the company of the where I had this interview, but the senior vice president of this financial company, she looked at my resume and she looked at me and said, Celia, and I said, there is a job in your company as a director. Can I join your company? And this is a trans job fair.
Wow.
And she said, Celia, I don't think you will fit into our company because they're all white, old men. And I don't want to put you in front of them as much as I really want to make a change in the company. I myself, I'm struggling. She was a senior vice president of HR.
Wow.
And to me, that told volumes. And I said, can you please get me one interview?
Mhm.
I will be able to impress them.
Right.
I have a
Yeah.
great credential and I can do it. She tried and she came back to me and she told me that, Celia, I'm not going to lie to you and I cannot. She was a good ally. But those are the kind of stories I heard. And in another
Wow.
company, which is a mobile company, Verizon,
Mhm.
when I applied for a job and I went for the interview, the HR manager, she told me, you look like a woman. You don't have to tell you're trans. Don't worry about it. And I said, you're not listening to me. I'm
Yes.
gender non-binary. I don't want to identify as a woman. And I don't want to this is my identity.
Exactly.
And So I don't, it's not a compliment saying
Mhm.
that I look like a
Right.
woman. That's a wrong thing to say. There were lots of things like this, especially one of
Yeah.
the interviewer, recruiter called me and said, am I talking to Celia Daniels? And I said, yes, this is she. And he started on and on, and he said, but you sound like a man.
Oh.
I told him, did you check my resume before calling me? Did you check my LinkedIn before calling me? And he said, no, I did not. And that's why I'm calling you. And I said, you should do your homework before calling a trans person. My pronouns are very clear. My LinkedIn profile is there. Why didn't you look at it before calling me?
Wow.
And then he said, he didn't even apologize. He just went on and on. And I felt so much of gender dysphoria in that call because he mentioned again, hey, but excuse me for a second, you sound like a man. I'm sorry. Are you really Senior Daniels? And that's the time it hit me that I said, no, this conversation is over. And he was from a very
Yeah.
reputed firm. And for me to turn down that offer as a senior program manager for that company was really hard, because I thought this is a great opportunity. But here's the thing, I put that little post on LinkedIn, and I woke up in the next morning and I saw there were 1.4 million views
Oh
on
my
LinkedIn.
goodness.
Oh.
Wow.
On LinkedIn, nobody sees. We probably get like 20,000 views. 1.4 million views on LinkedIn, and in 2 days it went to 2.4 million. And I was curious as to what people are telling about the situation. Are they
Yeah.
really getting a message? It's not Celia's story, it's our story.
Right.
There are people like us who are being marginalized, even in the interview process. They are not educated. And to me, that was appalling.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's so
Yeah.
much that companies need to learn to change the way they work.
I have
Yeah.
similar experience. I have like two opinion on it. I think when I first work in Transamerica, I do a lot of phone calls in the beginning,
Mm.
and I did say my name, but Shelby can be a man too. So
Oh,
when
okay.
I call, and then in the beginning they always say, "Sir, thank you, sir. Hi, sir."
Oh,
Yeah, but then over time I kind of know how to adjust my voice higher actually or softer, and now it's
Yeah.
the
mm,
problem has gone away unless I just woke up, then it's a different story. But then
yeah.
yeah, but then the other kind, like, it's like I think some people purposely call you that to offend you, because I went to a
Right.
city hall for real estate business to find out the blueprints and permits and all that. And then,
Mm,
City Hall has different, when you walk in, there's a security, there's barriers you need to go through. So at that time, from there, that point, when I go to the window, nobody call me sir or man or anything. But when I get to the window, this girl younger than me, and I asked a lot of questions. I think she got annoyed. So she goes, "No, sir, that's not it." So at that
oh,
point,
But it's
I know, because
clear.
I look like
Yeah.
this. I'm not looking,
Yes. Right.
like
Yeah.
I'm trying
Nothing
to say.
masculine looking about you.
Right. So I think for what your story just told, maybe they did it on purpose, try to not hire you, and you just back out. So I don't know, just my opinion. So do
they
you
may
have
be
any?
checking. Yeah, you're right. They may be checking boxes too. A lot of
Right.
times I feel like, hey, we want to hire a black person. We want, George Floyd happened. Oh, anti-Asian issues are happening. Let's hire an Asian person. And trans people are getting murdered every year. And almost in 2021, there were 50 trans people, trans women, and almost more than 85% of the folks who were murdered were trans people of color.
Hmm.
And so companies are just intentional or sometimes very performative. They just want to hire people because they want to check these boxes, Shelby. And
There's a
sometimes,
PR effect. Yeah.
yeah, what really bothers me is you can change a person who's ignorant. You cannot change a person who's arrogant.
Yeah,
You know.
and then I like what
Well
you're
said.
saying, because during July we just had a Pride Month. Every company you saw is about
Right.
Pride Month. But what Celia
Rainbow
says,
logos everywhere.
Pride Month is now, Pride is not just a month; it's a 365 days. So
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Exactly.
I think
Celia,
go for it.
how do you see things are changing now? All of us have had experiences like that, and will continue to
Right.
because we still live in a very messed up world.
Mm.
But what positive things have you seen that have been more inclusive, more accepting, or more even questioning or asking what our preferred name is or what our preferred pronouns are? What have you seen that's been positive?
Yeah, no, looking at the statistics in California, 27% of the youth in California, according to the Williams Institute in 2019 that came out, identified as gender non-binary. The numbers are going up every day. And even if you look at in 2030, the workforce is going to be 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials and Gen Zs. We are looking at a revolution where people are coming out of not just a process issue, a technology issue, but also a people issue. They never had people issues so far. COVID disrupted the whole industry. It disrupted the whole world, where people have started telling the companies that this is how I'm going to work. You want to figure it out. So companies are now thinking about what they can do proactively. They are trying to hire trans folks. I'm working with a company today to implement pronouns. It's a $26 billion pharmaceutical in California. And I'm trying to bring in the pronouns, and I see that everyone is willing to use pronouns. But unfortunately, due to the, according to the Pew statistics, 48% of the Americans are still not comfortable using pronouns because they see what is on the top. Bathroom, they only hear bathroom, pronouns. Bathroom, sports, pronouns. They don't see under the surface how much we have struggled. Homelessness, being going through mental health issues, going through incarceration issues. Every area of our life, we've been going through all these issues, and they don't see what is the root cause of the reason why people are different. Companies are changing, but I would say that I see a lot of change in the media industry also. The way in which the ads have come, it's always demeaning to the trans community. We've been portrayed as, drag queens or having a fishnet stock or just kissing someone.
Exactly.
It's always about that. I want to see trans entrepreneurs in the media industry. I want to see entrepreneurs, CEOs being portrayed in the media industry. I want to see astronauts who are trans in the media industry. And that's the way we want to change things. That's happening. But I'm glad that the younger generation is able to change that for the Gen X and baby boomers. And I'm so hopeful that the gender expansive community is much more on fire than my generation. My daughter is much more open to being an advocate for me than me. She talks about
That's
problems.
great.
She's 22 years old. I came out to her when she was 12. But I see that kind of change. And to me, that is very encouraging that the future generation, they're all thinking and they are all changing the way in which companies need to. I see a lot of change in the smaller companies, startups and smaller companies than the traditional companies. IBM has done a great job. But when you look at companies which are culturally heteronormative, they have a lot more to do. And it's not about compliance in the companies anymore. It's about compassion over compliance. It's not about compliance, because compliance is important. And they need to look at gender non-binary in 2023 in your Equal Employment Opportunity Act. You need to add all that information. But it's also important not just to create a business value while you're adding a trans person. Look at the human value. And that's what I try to advocate for. And that's what I see companies doing is, hey, if we hire, we are much better than our peers. We are innovative. We are productive. So they create a business case. Then I always tell them, keep the business case to the CEO, get the funding, get the approval. When you execute it, you want to make sure the employees are transparent. You want to tell the entire employees that we are doing this intentionally to create change and in our workforce, to have a psychological safe environment. That's the kind of workforce we are looking at, not just checking boxes, Black, Asian American. That needs to go away. I hope there will be one day when you don't have to check any of the race and ethnicity boxes.
Yeah.
It's like human being, it's like human being.
Human.
Check.
Exactly.
People, right? People.
Check.
Yeah. So I also realized that you noticed that you recently got into LinkedIn top 10 LGBTQI plus voices.
Yeah.
How did you how did they pick those people? Like, what did you have to do?
Yeah, I keep on advocating for the corporate change, and
Mm-hmm.
that's been one of the things that I've been doing, and they've been following me. Actually, I didn't know that. um, but I think what broke the glass ceiling was the 2.4 million hits in 2 days.
Oh,
And
okay.
my story was featured as the LinkedIn top stories for that day. And then I didn't know. My friends called me and said, Celia, you've been featured as the LinkedIn story for today. And I looked at my thing, and then came the Ukraine war, and then came other things. And I was like,
Oh my
seriously?
gosh.
Are they really doing this? I was happy for that day, but I knew it will end, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you get caught up in all this, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to leverage, and I said, this is great. People are learning. It's not Celia's voice. It's Michelle's voice. It's Shelby's voice. It's a voice of people like us, and so LinkedIn called me and said, we want to add you as one of the top 10 voices for LGBTQ in 2022. It's a good pat on the back. I wouldn't, I think we are all doing a great job. And
Yes.
so the recognition was a good pat on the back to me. And I will still continue to do, not because they have given me an LGBTQ voice
Right,
thingy,
right.
but I think we do. We are all amazing LGBTQ voices in this country and across the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
S-
Yeah, I think that is important. It is just a pat on the back, but it does recognize you and for your voice, for the work that you've been doing. And you've been doing so many things for so many years. And I've
Mhm.
kind of seen you from the kind of the outside looking in. And I transitioned just over, well, it's about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. And so I'm still the newbie here. But I think it is important for us to recognize people like yourself that has put in the effort and put in the work in seeing this change. And some of us that are new, that are coming in, or maybe even not in a position to be able to transition yet, we can still base and learn from you. And based on your experiences, we can kind of help pattern our experiences around that. One of the questions I had was, because I think a trans person will make a great DEI advocate. What would be some ways? I actually have a friend she's a very good cis ally, but she wants to enter the DEI space because she really wants to advocate for the trans community specifically, but of course everybody as well. What are some ways someone without a college degree or a degree with something else, what are some ways people could get into this space?
I think the first important thing is to connect with the community, to understand the community, to listen to the community, learning to unlearn certain things. For example, pronouns was hard for me when I had to use they. I was raised with an Anglican English grammar from England, from in India. So to me, using they was really hard. And then I had to unlearn that this has been used since 13th century in Shakespearean language. It's always been there in Pickwick Papers. It's been there in a lot of authors have used they as to describe a person. They didn't want to describe a gender. So it's been there. And I think in getting involved in the community, understanding the community is so important. So I can give you one quick example. That is allies. The word allies means acknowledge your privilege that you're a cis person who's trying to help trans community. Listen to the voice of the trans folks in our community. Learn to unlearn things, which is very important. Instigate tough conversations and be in situations where you have to make tough decisions. And E is to educate yourself and to educate others. First, you need to educate yourself. You can't just educate others and start educating yourself after that. The last one is support by being involved in the community. So this is something that I would advise to your friend when you look at being an ally is understanding the whole package of being an ally. It's not just, and you don't have to have a college degree. You just need to have a heart. Your academic qualification probably gives you a platform, but I've seen that I am in platforms where there are judges in the call. There are, I would say, someone who has written councilmen, councilwomen, people who are very, very important making changes in the call. And I'm part of this conversations because they want to hear my point of view as a person of color and an immigrant.
Excuse me.
So there are a lot of times
Excellent.
I feel that it's good to have someone advocating for us, but the most important thing is to not take away our space. Because I've seen a lot of, I posted in my recent posting on LinkedIn is give voice and give a platform for the trans community to tell their experiences and stories. The cisgender folks cannot share experiences like what we have gone through, the discrimination we have gone through, the
Right.
issues we faced.
Yeah.
They will not be able to share those narrations. They'll be just giving you theory. They will just say, "Oh my, by the way, my friend Shelby went through this. My friend Michelle went through this," but it's
Yeah.
not their story. So it's not. You don't need a college degree for this. You need
Mhm.
a good way to improve in your public communication. So Toastmasters is a good way to improve your public speaking skills, so that you will know how to articulate better within a given time. And I've been taking Toastmasters for a while, and my communication has improved quite a bit. I had a lot of vocal spikes, and I was able to learn to communicate much better and articulate much better because of these platforms. And so I would say, learn public speaking, be there, and keep on listening to the voice of the community. And when you have a panel discussion where, if your friend, her name is Susan, is invited to speak, she needs to give a platform for Michelle to come and share her story, while Susan can talk about DEI as an ERG group, as a person who is a part of the
Yeah.
ERG. But when it comes to the trans portion of it, bring people from the community,
Yeah.
an Asian person, a Black
Right.
person, a Native American person, who can be a part of these conversations. And
Excellent.
then you tie them all together rather than telling their stories, which is not a great way to be an ally, but
Right.
to.
Right.
So that's something that I would advise.
Excellent. Very well said. Thank you for that.
Okay, so tell us about your new business adventure. Where can people
Yes.
find you, and what kind of service do you do, and all that goodies?
Absolutely. So I started a management consulting firm called Rubicon Consulting. Rubicon came from my daughter's name. Her name is Rebecca.
Oh,
So I added,
Ah,
made it Rubicon. It's like the Rubicon,
I
the
love
Jeep
it.
company,
mm-hmm.
and then Consulting LLC. What I do is I used to consult for biopharmaceuticals and healthcare companies managing large projects. I've done HIPAA project management. I've done PMOs, pulling all strategies together for from a molecule to market. What do you need to do? I've been working with a lot of in the space for a while, and then I kind of thought about it in a different way, and I said, I'm a trans person. I'm out in my workplace, and so let me start talking about DEI, because if I can change the hearts of the people, company will change, and so we
Yes.
can hire more trans people. So that's when I started the tagline as redefining DNIB from bathroom to boardroom. A lot of times we are not invited to make strategic decisions in the ERG. Even products that we have today in the market, you cannot put they, them in the product. While I was admitted last year in the hospital in the ER because I had a cardiac issue, I went there and I was lying on the table. I look very gender neutral. I have earrings. And I was lying there. This person took my ID, and there was an X in my ID, but she kept looking at me. She kept looking at it, and then she went to the system. It was a G EMR, an electronic medical record system. She added a M in the system because the system didn't have an option for an X. So sometimes we need to change technology
Wow.
vendors also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you build a product, we have to make sure it's neurodiverse.
Right.
People can use it. So someone who's having dyslexia, someone who's having color, visually impaired folks, people like us, we need to be included in that. So I've been vocal about all the product companies. So product companies send me their products to evaluate and see if it's gender inclusive. I do that
Mm-hmm.
for some companies free of charge. I started writing policies for companies too. I've written policy for a very large electrical company, and I continue to do that. I continue to advocate for policy change in the company. Don't just hire trans people. Don't just hire trans people if you don't have policies, if you don't have framework, if you don't have people, process, technology in place.
Mm-hmm.
Get all
Right.
that, get your ducks in a row, and then hire
Right.
people. And that's my story across the board. So
Yeah.
mental health challenges, talk about it. And I've seen that a lot of them started inviting me to panel discussions and they want me to speak. And I told them, don't call me next year if you have not done anything about this.
Hey, good. Good for
I
you.
say it in a nice way, not in, not in an arrogant way,
That's
but I
good.
tell them, hey, call me every year. What are you really
Yeah.
doing inside? And they'll say, Celia, we're having a hard time. We have some bosses who don't even agree with this LGBTQ. I said, that's why I change it. Change it. I'll help you change.
Yeah.
Write policies. Speak to your HR. I think that's what I love doing. That's my destiny, and that's what I do. My company can be is listed on a LinkedIn in my
Mhm.
profile,
Yes.
and also I'm a part of Transcan Work and the
Right.
executive board, trying to hire. And I'm also politically active. So I'm the vice president of Stonewall Democrats in Ventura County.
Mhm.
I do a lot of advocacy in our county. I'm in this August, end of August, I'm going to the police station and educating my police chief here in
Wow.
Thousand Oaks
Excellent.
Nice.
about what the way in which they need to be sensitive to the LGBTQ community. So I do all the
Excellent.
advocacy. I'm working with the county of Ventura County to do DNI rehab, a Department of Rehab. I work with them. So I think we have a lot to do. We have a very small lifespan on this planet.
Right.
I want to make a difference. I don't want to
Yeah.
die as a CEO of a company, but if I create a CEO from a trans person, if I create a trans leader, if I create a trans astronaut, if I create a trans entrepreneur, and then that's what I
Yes.
am called to do. I'm called to enable people. I'm called to enrich and empower people, and that's what I love doing. And I'll continue to do that till I leave this planet.
That's awesome. Like a
Wow.
legacy,
You're
right?
amazing.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you so much for all of your effort. And please understand that it's okay to receive accolades from other people, but really from our community, thank you so much for all the work you do.
Mhm.
You are affecting change on the front lines that will impact so many of us. And so we stand in gratitude to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Shelby, for
Thank
what you
you.
do.
Yeah, so we're gonna close this out. Do you have any advice for people? Maybe I always ask this for our interviewer because like you just said, our experience really counts, really make a difference. A lot of other people they speak, they pull the data, they pull the numbers or theory. So that's why I always ask our guests, what's your advice for for our audience listener who may be ally or who may be not thinking about transition and not too sure on that stage.
Absolutely. I think we all have our own journeys,
Right.
and find out what your journey is, and confidently and boldly just go ahead with your journey, no matter what people say about your gender, the way you identify, the way that you use your pronouns. Just do it, and you will be able to see that the community will change around you only if you change.
Right.
I think it's so important for you to lead the change, you to be the confident person in the room. And if I can make a difference, a South Asian immigrant who was so shamefully living in India with guilt and shame can come out and create a change in a 40-year-old, $26 billion company. I'm the first trans gender non-binary person who made a change where my legal name is different from my birth name, from my authentic name. And if I can make a change, we all are change makers.
Mhm.
You may be working in a McDonald's, you may be working in a small firm, you may be in a big firm, you have not come out. But just think about how much impact you can make. Even if you don't come out, find what your journey is and slowly come out the way you want to, not because others want you to. And for the allies, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, you are an amazing ally, and I'm sure that you will continue to be an amazing ally. But please give us platform to hear our voices, Shelby's voice, voice
Thank
of Michelle, my voice, and people from our community in your panel discussions, in your conferences. Bring us in there, even if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And that's going to change your conversation, the dynamics of how you manage your entire program and your trainings, your events. It will make a big difference. So thank you so much for this amazing time.
Thank you so much
Shelby,
for
I
your
know we have
time.
I know we have a lot to catch up.
Yes,
Maybe
we
one
have
of
to
these days
catch up
we'll
again
yeah.
in another episode or outside, on both.
Yeah,
Both
or both.
actually.
Yeah.
I would
Yes.
love to talk about Melody at some point in
Yes, we
time.
haven't had a chance to talk about her.
We
Yeah,
will do one session on that as
sure.
to how the law firms. Yesterday, I
Yes.
was in LA, Lambda Legal. I was in one of
Mm-hmm.
their meetings. So I was thinking about our situation. Like
Right.
maybe it's definitely a good conversation for a next conversation
Okay.
podcast
Yeah,
about.
Melody. Yes.
Yeah, those things will
Okay.
be great.
All right. So thank you for your
Excellent.
time,
Excellent.
and thank you for all the information that you share and all your activist work. It's very amazing and inspired me personally as
Thank
well.
Yes,
you.
Yes.
likewise.
Thank
And
Yes.
we'll be sure to put all the links
Yeah,
of
your
LinkedIn
links
and your
to.
website, everything. We'll put them in the show notes as well as YouTube. So thank you so much, Cecilia, for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
we'll
Michelle.
invite you back very, very soon. Bye.
Yes, very soon. Thank
All
you.
right,
I would
so,
love to.
all right. So
Thank
thank you for listening and watching. We will be back next time.
Yes, your voice matters. Just remember that. Thank you.